Right? I don't care if your axe is blunt. When you're getting hit with a fucking 7-foot pole with a piece of metal in the end, you're in bad
Do
shape.
they blunt the maces as well?
Yeah, they got blunt maces.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar RPG Podcast. I am Clayton.
I'm Jordan.
I'm Eliot.
Before we get started, you can find show notes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/alienfamiliar. And if you would like to help us out with supporting the show, you can do so at patreon.com/alienfamiliarmedia. So if you enjoy our content and would like to help us out with hosting costs, any help you would be able to give us would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are going to be talking about how COVID and online tabletop gaming has improved and worsened the gaming experience over the past year and a half or so since all of this started happening. Eliot, since you were the one who brought this up as the topic you wanted to talk about, I guess I'll throw it to you. Where do you want to start talking about? Because there's been a lot of changes in the way that we've all been gaming over the past 18, 19, 20 months.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kick it off with my own personal experience and let it go from there. I just, there's not a whole lot of positives to say about this past couple years, but I will say that, one of the things when lockdown started, I found myself reaching out to friends who, such as you guys, and I found people were wanting to kind of craving a little bit of connection, even if it was digital, and naturally that led to, combining that with a lot of I think just free idle time a lot of people ended up with. I know I ended up having a little too much just free time on my hands. COVID, when it comes to role-playing, one of the good things is it brought me back to the table. I had been gone, hadn't played games in a really, really long time. And in the past, because, friends had, gone their separate ways. And yeah, we all have this natural bias towards in-person gaming, which we can get into that. But I found that when the pandemic happened, it kind of brought people into a more, willing kind of, attitude to try an online game. And I've had a lot of great fun. It's why I'm on this podcast. It's I ended up running my own game for, a year-ish. And it was just it was a bright spot in an otherwise bleak period of my life. So in that way, I feel like overall, for gaming for me, COVID really allowed me to reconnect to the hobby. But I know you guys have expressed some desire to get back to the way things were. Well, but how do you guys feel about its impact?
I definitely agree that it has been one of the ways that people have been able to maintain contact with each other. I personally have been using online gaming for tabletop in one form or another since, I don't know, the mid-2000s. I started back when OpenRPG was a platform and when Map Tools was a platform, and the different things that have come in between then and now, when we have things like Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds and Foundry and Astral and all of these other online platforms for playing role-playing games. The biggest change that I've seen has just been the way in which people for one thing, all of the existing platforms had a huge surge in the number of people who are using them. And I've also seen a huge increase in the proficiency of people who are coming into the hobby with being able to use these tools. And I credit that to just the fact that so many people are having to use things like Zoom and other conference call technologies. And it has really improved the existing online tabletop role-playing because you don't have to teach so much of the etiquette anymore. I remember, like, it has always been a sore spot for me, like just how much training actually goes into how do you actually facilitate an online or a conference call type situation. And I have seen people just over the past year and a half just starting to automatically have headphones separate from their microphone, so that they're not just playing stuff out of the speakers and then it comes through and causes a huge feedback loop. I've seen a huge improvement in the technicalities of people being proficient with these with doing it, so that whenever I am playing online on Roll20 or some other program, it just seems like it goes a lot easier. You don't have to spend the first 10 minutes of first 10 minutes or more of every first session going over, hey, I can't hear you. I can't hear anybody. What's my problem? I can't get my headphones to work. I can't get my mic to work. People are able to actually fix those problems now.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the number of conference, video meetings that I've done over the course of the pandemic quickly eclipsed. I would say within a month of us getting locked down out of school, I'd already been on video conference calls equal to my entire life prior to that. And since then, it's week. Nowadays, I usually can plan to have a sit down meeting with, in a professional setting, at least once a week, if not multiple times a week, for whatever various, circumstances. And yeah, it's kind of wild how quickly everybody's taken to online, just online video conferencing, and it's developed its own culture of, I didn't think about that. It really has developed its own etiquette very naturally and organically. Jump in, Jordan. What's your thoughts? I'm curious because you pretty much live online now in your professional life. How do you feel about the online platform?
Well, you're right. Since I moved away, it's really the only way that I can role play anymore. There's a local game shop here, but honestly, I've only been in it a couple times, and I don't even know if they do role playing there or not. So it's like 100% of my gaming experience, and really has been, at least, since COVID started, with the lockdowns and everything. Like most people, I was pretty happy that, like, when I was still in Athens with everybody, that it seemed like our group, like, took things seriously when it became clear that it was getting bad. And, there was a lot of, like, uncertainty as to, exactly how careful people should be, as far as, like, little gatherings and stuff. But I don't know, I find myself missing the face-to-face a whole lot more than I thought I would. And I think a large part of it has to do with, like you said, it's also my work life. So I spend all of my work time and almost all of my leisure time sitting in the same chair at the same desk, looking at the same monitor, typing on the same damn keyboard. Like, I don't know. I need to do something to mix it up, because, like, both my work life and my real life, the life I care about, have, like, blurred together because of this stuff in ways that I am not a fan of. I don't know. Do you guys feel any of that?
Yeah. I know personally, taking everything else I said, you guys might know a little bit better because you've maintained a more consistent role-playing lifestyle over the years. How many players do you think this left that left the hobby because they don't care for it? They maybe because of their work life, they're not super zoomy or whatever. Do you think that there's a subset of the role-playing game, old guard or whatever, pre-COVID days, that have just been iced out of the hobby now because they either can't or don't like or won't move to a more video or virtual option?
I would say the biggest difference, or the biggest change that you're talking about, comes from the players who, they get together with a group of friends, and the game is the excuse to physically get together in another, or either in their house or their friend's house, and just to get together for several hours on a weekday evening or on the weekend. I see those types. I've seen mostly those types of people. Those are the ones who kind of dropped out of the hobby. The ones who it was purely a social thing. It was something we did because we got together. There wasn't a drive to game. There was a drive to get together, and the thing we did when we got together was game. So I have seen some of those people drop off of gaming, but then I've also seen quite a few, like Eliot, you're an example of the people who come back into role-playing because it's something they used to do. They don't have anything else to do, so they might as well get back into this hobby. I think that's one of the main reasons why, according to sales reports, 2020 was the best-selling year for Dungeons and Dragons core rule books. Like the Player's Handbook has outsold itself every single year since it's got released for 5th edition, but 2020 was far and away above the expectations that they had going into the year.
Well, see, on that note, though, that's the thing, though. I mean, there are lots of people, I think, like me, especially the people I game with now. I have people on the West Coast that I play with now that I hadn't hardly even talked to in years. See, the thing is about the hobby is it was, I think as you get older, at least in my experience, and you start a family and you get into a profession, there is definitely, I wish I could remember the name of this game or this movie. Did anybody see, there's a movie about a role-playing game that's kind of like this weird mix of RPG meets Taxi Driver, where I'll try to make this brief. It's a funny, I'll try to find it and maybe Clayton can put it in the show notes, but it was about a DM who loses a player because, he's a middle-aged man such as myself, and basically the weekly role-playing game was about to cause a divorce, and he had to leave, you know what I mean? Because he had to dedicate, his wife, I guess, got tired of him spending so much time role-playing, but that was the premise of the movie, how it started. But I mean, in my case, it wasn't so much that I just lost a group, and because I had a busy life, I wasn't in a position to go make a brand new group of friends, or either introduce them to role-playing games or really crack into a new group, right? So as I got older, it was the desire to leave the hobby. It never really faded with me. It's just the difficulty of getting into a group or building a group just exceeded what it was worth, the time investment, right? And it really opened up a door for people like me, because all of a sudden there were people that I knew who all of a sudden maybe in the past were like you guys. I mean, you had games going on, and like the idea of playing online was a pale comparison. But then all of a sudden everybody was shut in, and next thing you know that there were players available, and I was able to get back in the hobby. That's really, to me, I think the main thing. It was really great for me, but there's definitely those people who it didn't bring along that I feel for, that it's kind of left this part out of their life,
Actually, physically getting people together was the hardest part, and like you were describing, like creating a group, that is the hardest part of role playing. Not just because you've got to set aside the time, but you've actually got to set aside a place, and you have to, in addition to the time where you're all together, you also have the travel time. You have the quite frankly, most people's desire to just not do things whenever it comes time to relax. I mean, speaking for myself, I am an introvert. I relax by basically getting away from everybody. And one of the reasons why I think online gaming works a lot better for creating a new group is you have if you don't have a group already, there are tools online for just finding essentially a pickup group. But if you are playing online with a group of people who you actually know in real life, it is so much easier with COVID, because where are you? Oh, you're at home, because we're all at home. And what are you doing in the evenings? Oh, you're doing nothing in the evenings, because everywhere is shut down because of COVID. So we have a time and we have a place where we can all agree we are available. We are available at home. We have computers, and we have an abundance of free time in the evenings. I think that's been the biggest reason why online gaming has had this big boom, why there are so many people coming back into the hobby or are transitioning to the online from their face-to-face groups, because in a lot of ways it is just a whole hell of a lot easier to get together online.
Finding a pickup group like you're describing seems really strange to me, and this is me speaking as one of the more introverted people that I know. I mean, zero participation in social media, all this. Clearly I'm, not in the time in human history that would probably be most comfortable for me to exist in. But playing with strangers, with something like a role-playing game, the thought of it makes me anxious. And I've tried it a couple times with people at work and things like that, and it's weird to me. And I think it's because it's always been such an intimate experience, with some of my closest friends and all of that, people that I've known my whole life, or like instantly connected with and knew would be friends for years to come. The idea of just like dropping in with 5 people I've never met before and just being able to like free form, like role play the way that I'm used to, something about that really, really sticks out as being repulsive to me. Good for people who can do it, but I wonder how many people are like me that are like very put off by that idea of like getting on a forum and just randomly falling into a group of people.
Me too. I'll echo that for sure. I've never personally attempted to get into a random group because it's, a big part of role playing for me is connecting with close friends. It's an excuse to get together with people I already know and share this hobby. How does that work, Clayton? Since you're the only one here that has had that and had that with a little bit of success, how does that go?
Well, I liken it to sifting through a needle stack or a haystack in search of needles, because the players who you want to continue playing with are the needles in the haystack. I have gamed online over the years with probably hundreds of people. And the number of people who I have on a list of, if I'm going to play a game, who I think I might call up if I'm going to be starting an online game, I think I've got like 6 names on that list.
Wow. So what is it about the vast majority of these people that are so off-putting out of this random sampling of online role players to you?
It's not off-putting. It's the fact that it's so easy to get into a game that it's so easy to just drop out of a game for literally any reason. Even I'm as little of a reason as, I just don't feel like clicking on the app right now. I have been the game master of the majority of the games that I have played online, and the amount of player attrition is just unbelievable. I have created games, and I've also been a part of games where the first session you have 6 people show up for either character creation or show up for the first session with their characters already made, and if you are lucky, 2 people will show up for the second session. And this isn't, it's happened so many times that I don't think it's my gaming style, and theirs is just not jiving. I don't think it's a question because I have been in groups, and I always try to be the one one of the few who come back for the second session regardless. But I have also been in the position where I just can't get to the game on time, and so it just becomes an easy pattern of, I just forget about the game once, and then there's this, I don't know, this inertia about coming back to a game if you've missed one session, and the because more often than not, the game has just fallen apart at that point.
Mm-hmm. Right. Have you noticed more of this since COVID?
I have only started one online game of one pickup group online since the start of COVID, and it was not as dramatic. I think I had like half of the players show up for the second session, but I still had to do basically a second round and then a third round of recruiting for that game as things came up and players had to drop. This is something that happens in face-to-face games, but I think that it is so much more pronounced in online games.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's social pressure, right? It's just thinking about this as you talk. It's like, when you are gaming with a stranger, or let me reframe. When you're gaming with people everybody's been that person who, oh shit, I forgot it's a game night, or there's this other thing that I either really want to do, or other people want me to do, or people need me to do, and if you don't know the people that you're gaming with, there's very little consequence other than just not playing the game. But when you're playing with friends, you're going to be getting that side-eyed text message 15 minutes after you're supposed to be there. There's going to be a little soft pressure. There's going to be you got a little more skin in the game, because even though it's not going to break up any friendships at the end of the day, but it sucks to not show up for your buddy's game when you promise they will, and to just no call, no show is extremely rude table etiquette I don't know too many people. I can't really think of many just straight up no call, no shows that I've experienced in my gaming days, period.
One other thing that I think causes some of the no call, no shows is, yes, it is. I mean, we've all been in face-to-face groups and had to text somebody, hey, are you on your way? Well, whenever you've got that online, you only have probably the one way of getting a hold of them, via Discord, or sending them a message through, if you're on Roll20. Roll20 has a private messaging part of it. But if that person is not logged on into Discord, and they're not going to immediately get the message, and that is your only way of getting a hold of that person. So if somebody just forgets or is running behind, there's no way to get a hold of them and verify that they're on their way, or give them a reminder that the game is up, because if they don't log into Discord, they're not going to get any of the messages until the next time they log into Discord, and who knows how long that might be.
Man, I've had suspicions about this kind of trend for a while now, and what you're telling me sounds like it's confirming some thoughts that I've had about how in the last several years of D&D, it's gotten much more popular, just like you were saying, that higher sales every year, and in 2020 it exploded and all this stuff. But I'm not sure that the quantity of sales necessarily is a very good reflection of quality of players or the health of the hobby itself necessarily. I mean, obviously it's not a bad thing, but it's much cooler now to be a geek than it ever has been. And so a lot of these, I'll say it, normies, these tourists have kind of entered the game, and I get the feeling like it's a cool thing to say that you've played D&D, but have you really? Have you sat down for 6 months? Have you got a character, past level 5? Like, how much D&D have you played? Did you sit around and kind of half listen while you were fucking around on your phone 2 or 3 times and, rolled dice when people told you to? Back when it was not only something that you had to seek out, it was something that you had to study. It was something that you had to kind of earn a place at the table to do, because I remember a lot of old guard D&D players were were very gatekeepy. They were very skeptical about new players, especially young ones, because they didn't want somebody to come in and just joke around and fuck off with this game that they'd spent a lot of time and energy, turning into something that they enjoyed week after week. So you had to like earn a little respect and, show maturity and all that sort of thing and show up, like you were saying. And now it's like every single technical and physical hurdle you could possibly imagine has been removed. Anybody can kind of, flow in and out as they like. But, it's how valuable is something that you don't really have to earn. And even if you get past all that stuff, back when it was something that was a thing of scorn, like you were making a personal social sacrifice in some ways to be a part of Dungeons and Dragons. And now it's like, did this cool thing this week. Here's, me with some dice in my hand or whatever the fuck, here's my character sheet. All right, did that fun activity. What's the next thing? Does that make sense, or am I being a crotchety old man?
It does make sense. I do think you're being at least partially a crotchety old man, though.
Probably.
There has been a definite increase in just the number of people and games that are available online since COVID. I don't think that it's just this geek chic thing that people are doing just to say that they did it. Like, and I point to Roll20 because that's the platform I typically use. Before COVID, whenever I would do a search for a game, if I wanted to be a player, I might get a page and a half of results for my time slots that I would be available. And a page of results is, I don't know, like 20, 25. I don't know what the count is for how many is on a page. But just a couple days ago, I did another search, and I do searches like every month or so just to see what games are available, and I'm consistently getting 3 or 4 pages of listings for games that are available. And not only are there more games available, I am seeing games where like 50, 60, 70 people are applying to be players in this game that the GM has put a max of 6 players in. And as a GM, back whenever I started playing a game very early in COVID, I was, for my game, I was getting, I think I had like 50 applicants, like just say that they were interested in playing the game. And a surprising number of those people came and posted a character sheet that they wanted to play for the game.
Sorry, I had to step away for a second, but I'm hearing that, I'm assuming this is talking about, like, something that occurred to me was going back to that movie, and I looked it up. It was called Zero Charisma. It was made in 2013. I highly recommend it to any D&D player out there. I loved it. Don't look at the reviews or anything. But that was kind of the premise of the game, was that this very hardcore GM has to replace a longtime player with kind of like a younger, hipper, casual, And I think that that the COVID experience, having brought in so many new players, I could definitely see there being almost a culture shock. Players that maybe never would have been in, like people who don't really know each other, wouldn't ever socially interact and thus get connected in games. I could see the online random experience bringing just this mixed bag of personalities that could easily not be the type of group that a DM is kind of searching for. You know what I mean? Was that completely off topic? I'm sorry.
No, that followed.
I did want to ask a question, though, just about the online platform. On the DM side, how do you feel like the workload of the DM changes moving to an online platform?
Well, whenever you're playing on an online platform, you're much more expected to have a map with minis and things like that to use. there's a plethora of digital maps and props and minis. Picture, you can take any picture and turn it into a miniature. There's all kinds of online map making programs, but also people who have used those programs to create maps. And there are Reddit pages and Facebook pages galore of people just sharing for free all of their work. So there's a lot of resources, but there is this expectation that you are going to use these nicer resources. So there's a little bit more pressure to have it look nice. Whereas I feel like if you're playing face to face, it all just depends on how much money the game master is just wanting to sink into it, or wanting and able to sink into it, for how much presentation there is in a tabletop game.
That was 100% my experience. Luckily, for whatever reason in my own personal life, when I started DMing, I had gotten way into digital, kind of just hobbyist digital art stuff, making maps and just playing around with editing softwares and stuff. And so that was part of what drew me back into the hobby too, because I had been like, man, I bet I could make some cool maps. But I found quickly that for the companies, like the WotC, say, or Roll20, it opens up a whole other dimension of selling, because it didn't take me too awful long to ditch a lot of my notions of homebrew, homemade digital pieces, and just going out and buying the Strahd. I've never owned a physical copy of the Strahd book, but I've 100% got my money's worth out of buying the Roll20 version of that book, because it comes along with lots of maps, and it already has the dynamic lighting set established. And once you set that bar, it's very difficult to please a group of players who've grown accustomed to a high quality of digital, like just visual experience, to give them anything less quality. So, I mean, I wonder, you were saying the sales part, I wonder how much of that was double buying, because people found it like me, DMs found it like me, that it was just worth their time to spend another $40-$50 to rebuy a book they have in reality, just because it comes with all the digital assets and drastically reduces the workload, but allows you to keep that high bar that, like you were saying, I think that a lot of players kind of are expecting from a digital game. And not to mention the IT part of it. Did I turn my volume down? My bad.
I'm hearing you. I'm sorry. I'm just having trouble putting my thoughts together.
Well, one thing that always gritted on me that I hated, but it just comes with the territory as a DM in general, even in real life. But when you move to a virtual platform, all of a sudden you're an expert in the program too, right? So anytime, I don't know how many minutes accumulated was wasted on I can't see that. And then I have to dig into the settings, and it's all of a sudden I'm a Roll20 tech troubleshooter now. All of a sudden, that's another part of my responsibilities as a DM. That was maddening.
Man, all that shit pulls me out of it so fast. As soon as it becomes oh, it's on the wrong layer, or oh, my screen went black, or blah 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 blah. Fucking hell. I'd rather at that point people just narrate what's going on than fuck around with menus and settings and whatever. Because you're right, it takes forever to work out, and it's got nothing to do with what we're doing. And then usually that stuff always comes up at a time where something tense is about to happen. Something has just changed on the board. And so oh man, here we go. And it's oh wait, sorry. It's like a fucking loading screen for the drama to continue.
Yeah, that's the main reason why I continue to use Roll20 to the exclusion of all other virtual tabletops, is just because I have spent so much time in Roll20 I know Roll20 and I know how to do absolutely everything that I want to do in Roll20. The fact that I would then have to learn a whole new software, and a lot of times I'm wanting to play other game systems that would work better in a different software. So then I have the extra burden of not only learning another role-playing game system, but I would have to learn another virtual tabletop system on top of that. And the barrier to entry is just too much effort on my part in order to learn something new.
It's so funny hearing all this about like the quality expectations of things with these online modules and maps and all this stuff, compared to all the stuff that I've been digging into lately, which is the original white box D&D. I've been reading through it, and I've been watching a bunch of YouTube videos of interviews with people who were in those first couple of gaming groups of Gygax and Arneson and stuff, like right at the beginning of TSR and all that, and how they talk about this stuff. And the idea that we have a map that we look at on the screen that is the source of truth, that is like a high quality, cool looking rendering of what's going on, and like, you know, all the squares are perfect and all that stuff. Like, to those guys back then, that would have seemed crazy, because you were expected to have someone drawing a map as you go through the dungeon, and part of the game was like doing that accurately, or else you'll get lost and you'll be fucked with, to the point that there was like character abilities that had to do with that, you know. And now, like, it's completely the reversed, where there's no expectation for the players to be a creative, active force in the actual construction of the materials of the game in that way. They're supposed to be there as like actors, as like storytelling agents, but they're not participating in, like, you know, the physical representations of things as such. And I remember reading something about how when D&D first came out, Gary Gygax resisted publishing modules. He thought the idea was stupid because people could just make their own. And, you know, the first couple books are really just jumbled up kits of like how to build dungeons. And he thought nobody would ever pay for this. And so, you know, these secondary companies that were really just one or two people who were wanting to publish their own adventures came to him and either licensed or just straight up, you know, stole the Dungeons and Dragons name to publish the first couple of adventures. I don't know. It's just funny to me.
There is definitely a freedom of being able to, sit around a table and either the DM or the players draw the map, or just use it all theater of the mind. The thing with, like, if you're using like Discord as your sole and only means of playing the game for like narrative systems like World of Darkness or a lot of the Powered by the Apocalypse games, that's great. But if you are using Roll20 or one of the other virtual tabletops, it has the built-in map functionality, and so there is definitely that expectation that it's there, so you're going to use it, aren't you?
Yeah, the first time I messed around with Roll20 was way before COVID, a couple of years. I'm probably going back to 16, 17 maybe, and I didn't want to. I didn't really get my head around how to do the maps and stuff. So I just filled that panel with art that I thought would be interesting and would relate to the scenes. And I almost tried to come up with, I use it as like a visual representation of kind of what I was wanting to get across. And that did not satisfy anyone, I found very quickly. And I found myself, as I got into it, replacing that idea with, you know, some laboriously and time-consumingly made maps that I created, you know, as best I could in the program, because, like Clayton just alluded to, I mean, when it's there, it's expected to be used. Jordan, have you played a game outside of Roll20 that during COVID or even before that was just maybe on Discord or whatever?
I tried running a game straight in Discord with nothing else, and that went okay. I mean, we were doing theater of the mind stuff the whole time. It was a apocalyptic game. I ended up killing the game just because I got depressed running a post-apocalyptic setting in the world that we were actually living in, the apocalypse of. And so
Same.
After a couple
Same.
months,
I ran that game too.
Yeah.
At the beginning of COVID, I ran that game too. Like let's play a pandemic game playing ourselves. And then like 10 sessions in, I'm like,
oh my God.
This is not good for my mental health. We're done.
I need to escape. I don't know. That was fine, I guess. I wonder, like, looking at the new standards that these modules and maps in these virtual tabletops are setting for the game. And Clayton, you and I have talked about this a little bit in the past. Thinking about where technology's going, thinking about things like the various VR headsets and all that sort of thing that's available now. At what point do you think that the lines between multiplayer video games, Call of Duty or whatever, and virtual tabletops start blurring, like, to the point that distinguishing between them is like kind of arbitrary? You know what I mean? Like, I could easily see the next generation of virtual tabletops being a 3D environment that people are existing in, where people have got, instead of a cool token, you've got a cool 3D rendering of your character and in a world, and things like Fortnite and stuff like that are like clear examples that a broad swath of the population are interested in being 3D characters in a open sandbox kind of world that are highly customized to their liking. In that sense, it kind of feels like virtual tabletops are lagging behind. What do you guys think?
I would say I've gone back and forth a lot on what exactly you're saying, my thoughts on it. I remember way back when Neverwinter Nights came out for PC. This was a computer role-playing game with built-in tools that allowed a game master to create a dungeon and have their players go through it. And it was entirely built within the game, within the game's architecture, to allow a game master to do this. The idea was you could play your D&D game in Neverwinter Nights. And the modding community for Neverwinter Nights was fucking amazing. There were a lot of people putting out a lot of content, but it was never the GM sitting there with the players playing through the adventure. I think we have a very long way to go before we actually get to that, because I see there's so many barriers to it. Like, maybe I'm just being the grognard now, but like, I see older players not wanting to learn the new technology, especially a technology that is going to be outdated here within just a couple of years. Like, you can learn how to play a role-playing game in Meat Space, and once you learn one role-playing game, it's really not as insurmountable of a chore in order to learn another role-playing game. But to, in a lot of ways, learn in a completely different software, that is something that takes a lot of effort that I have seen. And maybe this is just because I'm older and because learning new things is harder, and I'm not as I don't have as much neuroplasticity where I can just pick up the new software as easily, even if the software is loosely based on something I'm familiar with. It seems like it just to me seems like there's, whenever you've got different games and each one of them has its own architecture, the video game aspect of it is just not as transferable. The things you learned in the previous software just don't translate as completely as learning a new role-playing game system. It seems like it's an entirely different beast whenever you go into it. And back 20 years ago, I thought that, yeah, we are very close to that, where the game master can play with their players and do it all in a virtual space. But having lived for 20 years expecting that to be just over the horizon, and seeing the limitations that prevent that from actually coming into fruition, basically the game master needing to be some sort of a like having more computer savvy than just somebody who is a hobbyist. I see that as being the biggest barrier. The game master for these types of games cannot just be a hobbyist. They have to be somebody who puts enough time and effort into it to learn it, to be essentially a professional at it. And even with all of the time that I have spent in Roll20 learning that system, I don't feel like I am good enough that I am a professional at it, but I can still use the tools. But whenever it comes to another game, another virtual tabletop, I just feel like I'm immediately in over my head, and there's so much more left to learn. And that dichotomy is what makes me think that we're still a long ways off from being a group of tabletop role players who use a video game to play through our game.
See, something comes to mind. See, here's the thing. If you take the never win or nots approach, and then I think using that as an example, and then Jordan, listening to you talk about it, what you're describing in my mind is kind of like letting technology advance to the point where the game almost becomes a Hunger Games simulator, where, the DM is outside this big digital bubble that they've created, and then the players get fully immersed into their characters and drop into the world. I don't think it's necessarily a curmudgeon thing. That's never going to replace tabletop role-playing games. That may exist, and in some ways it already exists. Like, for instance, there's a game I like to play called The Forest, and it's VR compatible, and it's multiplayer. So even though it's not designed by any of the players, I could easily see that we're very close to the next step or two in that concept, where all of a sudden you've got a guy basically creating video games for people to immerse themselves in VR and go. But the thing is, though, what all these things miss, and what the reason why, because of necessity and COVID, in my experience with Roll20, the reason why Roll20 combined with Discord scratches that itch is that the only way that a digital platform is going to replace the quote-unquote tabletop experience whole cloth is that what needs to be designed isn't a fully immersive video game. It needs to be a fully immersive someone's living room simulator. Because when people play, at least for me in my experience, when you come to a pencil paper role-playing game to play, you are not there for virtual immersion. You're actually not there for immersion, because video games have been more immersive for a really long time. You're there for all of the social aspects. And I think that Roll20 combined with a video conferencing, or chat, because it has it built in, you can use that, but, whatever, is because it simulates the casual aspect of it. I don't want you to paint me a picture. I have a brain. Okay, give me a sketch of what things look like, and I'll put it in my own brain. When I need the geometry of a dungeon laid out, yeah, it's nice if it looks cool, but it could just be a black and white box grid for all I care. Just to give me enough room to use the game's mechanics is really all it's there for. I'm there to see I'm there to enjoy my friends' performances. I'm there to chop it up. I'm there to have those break the character laugh moments. I'm there to hear you talk about your kids during the smoke break. And that's the thing that Roll20 misses, but gets closer to than anything else that I've experienced, because I just think a lot of these other tabletops and simulators, they're just aiming at the wrong thing. And they might be successful one day, but when they are successful, they won't be tabletop RPGs. They will be something else that's its own version of fun. You know what I mean?
Right now, it takes me a whole hell of a lot longer to prepare a session to play a game on Roll20 than it does to play a session in face-to-face. For making a game on Roll20, the additional steps I have to do is I have to find or make a map and find and make miniatures for it. I need to actually if I'm using something that is not a stock piece of Roll20, either something that I have purchased or something that comes with it already, it takes a lot more effort to put that. Like if I create a monster, it takes a lot more effort to put that monster into Roll20 and have it function properly whenever I go to roll it than it does for me to jot down a few notes of the relevant information to play in D&D. I can type pretty much as fast as I can think, but it takes more words to put that into Roll20 than it does just for me to write the notes of a creature's attack. And as long as it takes longer for a digital format to be put into a tabletop role-playing game, I think that's going to be the barrier that prevents this merging of the tabletop and a video game aspect. Because the way video games are right now, it takes a tremendous amount of work just to make one level. And if you like, I typically spend more time designing my face-to-face role-playing games than I do actually playing them. But the amount of time that it takes to put that into a digital format is multiplied. So there's just not enough time in the week for me to fully prepare a custom adventure in Roll20. I end up having to basically recycle stuff because I have played it so much that I can bring in a lot of resources that I've already made. And in a face-to-face game, I feel like I have a lot more freedom to just make something up on the fly and it work, rather than I have to have taken the time beforehand to put it in there in some fashion.
That raises an interesting question that I haven't considered, but sort of resurrecting the ghost of Marshall McLuhan here. What does the online medium do to the kinds of stories that you guys tell, or would want to tell, would take the time to put together? How do those kind of nuts and bolts constraints and possibilities of the platform alter the way that you would run a game? You talked about this a little bit just now, Clayton, but tell me more about that.
Well, I got thoughts.
Go right ahead.
You touched on something that I'd had on my notes for a minute, in that, kind of going back to what I was saying, is that they're not the same. None of these things are even the same activity. And as a DM, that was the first realization I had to make. And the example I want to start with is that, going back to that very first game I tried in Roll 20 years ago, before COVID, one of the huge obstacles was what you had talked about earlier, Clayton, was table etiquette. The biggest impediment that I had a hard time dealing with, and I hope that anybody who's listening to this, I know that a couple of our friends listen to this, I hope, and if anybody was in this game that's listening, I say this with all the love because it was a part of the growing experience. But the thing that I had a hard time dealing with then was, people talking over each other. I literally had players drawing dicks on my map because I gave them access and didn't know not to. All of these little virtual etiquette things because people were trying to impose the expectations and their experiences of being at a shared, live setting versus the digital thing. The problem now is, it's not necessarily a problem, it's just an evolution, but when you're confronting running a game online, is that all that etiquette's built in now. So a 3-hour role-playing game, content-wise, if you're going to sit down, at least in my experience, if you're going to sit down and plan, I'm going to run for 3 hours tonight. In the before times, if you were walking into a live setting, the amount of prep that you have for that 3-hour online game would be at least 6 or more hours in game, because inevitably you can't keep social animals from being social when they're face to face. We want to, and that's part of the reason why we get there, why we go to the table, is we want to see our friends. We want to take a break, and it's just built into the experience. When you're in the role-playing setting, the game, when it's going good, because when people try to have those same cross-table talk kind of things we're used to being able to do, it fucks everything up. But now that everybody's conditioned to know how to operate in this environment, this digital environment, it creates this very efficient your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn. And I found myself being exhausted at the end of sessions in ways I'd never been before, because it's just so streamlined and game focused. If you want to have a sidebar chat, you send each other text messages, you send each other private DMs or whatever, but you can keep playing. You know what I mean? The DM never has a break. You know what I mean? And so it's grueling in an exciting way some days, because if your game's going well and you're prepared, you just can really tell a story in a way it's even difficult to do to the same level in person. But unfortunately, like we've kind of, we've talked so much about the digital platform, I do want to throw a little bit at the things that I miss about it being around a table, is that those sidebar chats and that quote-unquote time wasting or slower pace, what have you, that is all the stuff I miss about a game. If I was in live gaming and I needed time as a DM to either come up with an idea, I could always rely on my players to get distracted. And I could just, I remember DMing in person, that was a trick that you could use, is you could feel, I need 5 minutes here to collect myself. And you could just allow players to get distracted. Next thing you know, it's people have gotten snacks, people have taken smoke breaks, people have gone to the bathroom, people have just chopped it up for a little while, and the whole time, you as the DM, you're sitting back, you're taking a break, and you're getting your mind right. And those are fun, and those are a big part of the attraction to the game in the first place. But the digital side, the digital way, is much more like concentrated, and a lot of times you just, as a DM, I remember I need 15 minutes or I need 5 minutes. Everybody go take a break. I'm pausing. And now all of a sudden the DM's on a clock because he's a performer in a way that you've never been before. I know I'm going long, but I've thought a lot about this, and I don't want to say that it's a bad thing. I'm not trying to paint that it's a bad thing about the medium. It's just a reality of playing that way. And, it has to be part of the fun for both the DM and the players. And the DM has to know that it is very much spotlight on you to be the general. Even though you're in facilitating the players to play, you have the ball in your court a lot more than you would at a traditional game. And it can sometimes, that can be the biggest challenge, aside from even making and that's not even talking about making the digital assets and shit. That's a whole nother ball of wax. Just constantly being on the spot as a DM is so much more challenging digitally, does that ring true to you, Clayton?
Yeah, your example of like just needing to take a couple minute break. The worst thing about doing that virtually is when the DM is done with the break, there is no way to call people back. Like if you say, okay, we're going to take 5 minutes, I'm going to collect myself, if you're doing it just over Discord, after that 5 minutes and nobody is back at the desk, the DM has no control over bringing the game back together. If you're all in the same location, the DM can just like snap his fingers and say, "Hey, get back in here. We're ready to start back up." If you're playing virtually, you are literally at the mercy of everybody getting back online, putting their headphones back on so that they can actually hear the game in order for it to be continued. That point aside, I do want to answer Jordan's question of what are the types of stories that you can tell and what are the types of stories you can't tell in a virtual tabletop. The types of games that they are extremely well built for are tactical games, because that is what the virtual tabletop space is made for. It's made for being able to present information tactically and for the players to play through it and see where all of the pieces are on the board, and to very quickly just click a button for their pre-generated attacks to determine whether or not the attack hits. Combat flows incredibly well over virtual tabletop. I prefer virtual tabletop for combat over face-to-face meat space gaming. I love the tactical aspects of virtual tabletops. And I feel like my hex crawl game that I played at the start of COVID, I think that went very well. I think it was the perfect medium for that particular game, because I was able to show on the map, here's where you guys are. You guys are moving over into this next area. Now let me switch over to one of my generic pre-inserted maps for the particular type of terrain that you guys are on for this random encounter that you guys have had along the way. Or I could set up a particular location ahead of time for the particular hex that they were in, and whenever they got there, yes, I could pull up that map and the monsters were already there and we could just get going. I didn't have to set the table up during the process of the game session. I just clicked a button and all of that pre-generated material was already there. So if you can do something where you can pre-plan all of the stuff that you're going to use, virtual tabletop is the better way to tell that story. The types of stories that virtual tabletop is not set for doing are spontaneous stories or immersive stories. And by immersive, I mean the types of stories where I, as the GM, can set a mood and I can look around at every player there and I can read their body language and see whether or not that they are a part of the experience, whether or not they are engaged in the experience. Particularly horror comes to mind with this. We are on the verge of Halloween season right now, so I probably got horror on the mind. But like being able to set a horror mood in physical space is not only possible, it's very fun to do. Setting a horror mood in a virtual tabletop space is impossible because I don't have control over whether or not my players have the lights on in their home, whether or not they have whether or not they have Reddit open on the other side of their monitor where they are reading Reddit while we are going through the game session. I don't have the control over those things. Therefore, I cannot create an immersive game in a virtual space.
I want to push back on that because I feel like being contrary, and and you're right. Roll20 and virtual tabletops, just by virtue of being so seamless now to set up a game board, it compels you to use it. You're almost silly not to. And like you said, combat does run so efficiently when you do choose to put minis on a map, and it really does. That said, though, I've had experiences. It was early on in COVID, but like we talked a little bit about the games that were a little too close to reality that I quit. Well, I hadn't even thought about using Roll20 by that time, and we played maybe 10 sessions of that game. I think you can get close to the immersive stories in a different way, though. I think not playing in Roll20 is one way. Like I'm thinking theater of the mind games is how I'm thinking about what really grasping what you're saying is that the games that are heavily relying on theater of the mind does require it relies a lot on face to face and attention and stuff like that. But something we didn't do in my game very often. It's not always going to be available because of technology. I know, Clayton, your internet is not such where you can afford the bandwidth to put on a camera. But yeah,
I just want to point out, it's not that I can't afford it; it's that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, I get you. Yeah, but your bandwidth doesn't allow it to happen. That said, in games I've played and other, in different times, I felt a lot closer to the sitting around somebody's living room experience in games where we didn't play in a virtual tabletop. And it was insisted that everyone who could have their camera on. And I can't speak to the horror thing. It kind of makes me want to rise to the challenge and maybe run a Halloween one-shot and see if we can't get some people spooked. But, there is, even just by virtue of being able to see your friends' faces, you get a ton more information about that you need as a DM. You can you can sense boredom. You can sense distraction. And you can even tolerate a little bit more sidebar stuff because people can interject a little easier because they see your faces. You can see when somebody has something to say, and as the DM, you can say, cool, I need this 5 minutes anyway. I'm going to lay back and let them talk. And then, of course, not having the tabletop there staring at them, you can drop pictures in if you need to in the chat and say a Discord or whatever, and you can still get that effect. But those games that I have played felt very close, very, very close to in-person games. And then when I started running in D20 or Roll20, it got further away. And to the point where in the future, like I was planning future games, I don't think I'll be running in Roll20. I would like to run a game that's all theater of the mind virtually to see if I can, because I really do think that it can be done. Does that make sense?
Eliot, you just hit a point that I was wanting to bring up myself, and that's the importance of seeing other players' faces, and both as a DM and as a player, I miss that tremendously. Not because the people we played with were so good looking, but because it's so hard to take a temperature of the room, even if you've got cameras, I think, because you're still just looking at, 5 or 6 people's just like blank faces, vaguely looking in the direction of the camera. Maybe it's off to the side or something, but it's not the same as eye contact. There's no communication going on. And there's events, we've all had these a million times. There's times at the table where if you're running or playing or whatever, you say something, someone else says something, you catch another player's eye, there's an expression, there's some kind of like semi-telepathy that goes on, and there's a kind of psychic thing that's happening, so to speak, between people that I think the digital layer just about suffocates completely. And part of that is even verbal, like, yeah, now we're better at not talking over each other, but it's also impossible to have more than single channel communication because of that. Back when we were all sitting around a table, somebody could say something and somebody could respond with something funny with perfect timing, and people would laugh, or multiple people even could, and you could hear like 2 different people saying something funny and laugh about it, or make points about serious matters or whatever. Now it's all very, very strict, mechanical, and I think in some ways it keeps people from talking, and that's, I don't know, I always thought it was chaotic when people were talking at the tabletop before, but now that I see the regimented alternative, I miss the organic chaos of face-to-face communication.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, how many times... I mean, there was nothing more satisfying than when the GM was involved with another couple players. And, you know, I mean, me and you have done this, I'm sure, a million times, Jordan, in the way back. You know, that's whenever, you know, the mischievous ones might just cuddle up a little bit and say, so, you do this, you do that. And then as soon as the game comes back to you, you and that guy come out gangbusters. You know, that's just not possible in this medium.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's different. That's the moral of the story. It's good, and it's different, and sometimes not as good. I can't wait to get back around the table.
Hear, hear. So I guess we're ready to move on to geek things?
Yes, sir.
Eliot, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I've plugged it a couple times in this session, so might as well. Oh, yeah. Everybody go watch Zero Charisma. I'm sure it's available on the Amazons or whatever. I don't remember how I found the movie, but it's one of the few movies I've ever seen that was about role players role playing. That is the plot. It all revolves around it. It's well produced. It's not like shabbily made or anything. It's a proper movie. And it's funny. It's anybody who's played D&D would really vibe on it. And it's not that old, 2013. Go give it a watch. It's a really good movie. I enjoyed it a lot.
Jordan, do you have anything?
Yeah. I would recommend people go back and check out the original white box Dungeons and Dragons PDFs. There's 3 of them. I'm just about done with the 3rd volume. They're super short. They're like, I don't know, 35 pages each or something like that. For one thing, they're incredibly charming. They're put together like a punk zine, and there's just these little ink doodles here and there of like, you know, really, really crappy art, but like there's something provocative about some of them. And it's interesting to read these people really trying to figure out what the fuck this idea is that they have, and see them try to put things into words. Such an influence from like other things that they're just merging together. They're like really just building something out of wet clay here in front of your eyes. And as a piece of gaming archaeology, I think it's well worth it. You can pick these up on Drive-Thru RPG if you feel the need to pay somebody that had nothing to do with it for the books, or it's certainly available in many other places if you believe information should be free. So check it out and enjoy. I've learned a lot about what exactly Dungeons and Dragons was thought to be from the beginning, and I like it.
I don't really have much for my geek thing. I have been watching a YouTube series by Bob Worldbuilder, specifically testing out various Dungeons and Dragons game mechanics to see whether or not they are actually realistic. Trying out like particularly movement speeds and difficult terrain. And in one episode, he tried to walk 24 miles in a single day to see how realistic it was for player characters to be able to do that every single day. So I would say Bob Worldbuilder's series on game mechanics in the real world. Give a check out if you haven't been able to try out some of these things on your own. Check him out because he's actually done some of the research on it. And with that, I think what you guys say we stop this bullshit and start rolling some dice?
I would love to.
This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.